The opening minute sets the tone by challenging common perceptions. The Second World War is usually framed around the colossal powers: the United States, the Soviet Union, Britain, Nazi Germany, and Japan. But this hook reframes the narrative by asking viewers to consider an unexpected player, Canada, and to rethink what they know about its role. Dramatic visuals help heighten this effect. Flashes of D-Day landings, bombers flying over Europe, coded messages, spy training facilities, hidden in the forests, and Canadian troops marching through foreign terrain. These aren't images most people associate with Canada's wartime story, which is exactly the point. The voiceover hits with two provocative claims. First, that Canada was a pivotal but underappreciated force. Second, that it played a hidden, strategic role, not just with soldiers, but with intelligence, innovation, and diplomacy. Then comes the thesis. This isn't just about revisiting old facts. It's about uncovering how Canada helped shape the outcome of the greatest conflict in human history. A promise to the viewer that what follows will shift their understanding of both the war and Canada's place in it. When Canada declared war on Germany on September 10, 1939, 7 days after Britain, it marked a turning point in the nation's history. This wasn't just about joining a global conflict, it was a statement of sovereignty. For the first time, Canada made its own decision to go to war, independently of Britain. That delay, though brief, carried immense symbolic weight. It reflected Canada's evolution from colony to self-determining dominion, asserting its right to shape its foreign policy. The public response was complex. Many Canadians remembered the horrors of World War I, and there was fear and skepticism. But there was also a strong sense of duty, especially in English Canada, toward Britain and the Allied cause. French Canada was more hesitant, wary of being pulled into a war perceived as distant and imperial, yet even there, support gradually grew. Canada's mobilization for World War II was not just rapid, it was monumental in scale and deeply transformative for the country. Within weeks of the declaration of war, enlistment centers saw long lines of volunteers, many of whom were motivated by a sense of patriotism, loyalty to the British Empire, or the hope of employment during the tail end of the Great Depression. By the end of 1939, over 58,000 Canadians had enlisted, a number that would swell to more than 1 million over the course of the war. But mobilization went far beyond recruitment. The government, recognizing the need for full national commitment, launched an unprecedented campaign to reorient the entire Canadian economy toward wartime production. Civilian industries were converted almost overnight. Automobile plants began building armored vehicles and aircraft components, textile mills produced uniforms and parachutes, and food processing facilities shifted to meet the needs of troops, at home and abroad. This transformation required not only resources but coordination. The Department of Munitions and Supply was created under C.D. Howe, who acted with near-dictatorial efficiency to manage everything from materials procurement to factory construction. Under his direction, Canada became one of the largest arms producers in the Allied world, supplying not only its own forces but also Britain, the Soviet Union, and others. Training centers also played a pivotal role. Military camps emerged across the country, such as Camp Borden in Ontario and Camp Shiloh in Manitoba. Canada would soon become a central hub in the British Commonwealth Air Training Plan, often referred to as the Aerodrome of Democracy, training tens of thousands of pilots and aircrew from around the world in the safety of its vast and relatively untouched territory. Equally important was the social impact. Women entered the workforce in record numbers, filling roles traditionally held by men, factories, offices, farms, signaling the start of a major cultural shift. Communities organized scrap drives, rationed goods, and invested in war bonds. The country was united, not just in military action, but in purpose. In short, Canada's swift mobilization wasn't just about preparing for war, it was about reshaping an entire society. The scale, speed, and scope of the transformation elevated Canada's international standing and set the stage for its post-war emergence as a more confident, independent global player. Canada's wartime contributions extended far beyond battlefields and factories. They delved deep into the shadowy world of espionage, intelligence, and cryptography. While often overlooked in popular history, these secret operations played a crucial role in the Allied war effort, and laid foundations for the modern intelligence community. One of the most remarkable examples was Camp X, located near Whitby, Ontario. Officially named Special Training School No. 103, Camp X was a clandestine facility established in 1941 through cooperation between British intelligence, the SOE, Special Operations Executive, and Canadian authorities. It served as a training ground for covert agents tasked with sabotage, subversion, and resistance coordination behind enemy lines. Camp X was the first spy training school in North America and trained hundreds of operatives from Canada, Britain, and the United States. These recruits learned skills such as demolition, unarmed combat, wireless telegraphy, surveillance, forgery, and psychological warfare. What made Camp X so vital was not just its curriculum, but its role as a strategic bridge between British and American intelligence services, particularly before the U.S. officially entered the war. It's also famously connected to the world of fiction. Ian Fleming, who would go on to create James Bond, visited Camp X during the war while working with British naval intelligence. Many believe his experience there directly inspired aspects of Bond's character and the spy world he inhabited, particularly the blend of espionage, gadgets, and shadow warfare. Beyond Camp X, Canada also made major contributions to intelligence and cryptography. The Examination Unit in Ottawa, established in 1941, became Canada's first civilian signals intelligence organization. Staffed by cryptanalysts, linguists, and mathematicians, it worked closely with Bletchley Park, the British code-breaking center that famously cracked the German Enigma code. The Examination Unit focused on intercepting and decoding enemy communications, particularly diplomatic and military transmissions. Its successes fed into the broader Allied intelligence network and were instrumental in shaping strategic decisions. In addition, Canada also hosted listening stations and signal interception sites that helped track German U-boats in the Atlantic, contributing to the crucial Battle of the Atlantic. The secrecy surrounding Canada's intelligence contributions during World War II wasn't just a tactical necessity. It became a defining characteristic of the nation's wartime legacy. Unlike major battlefield victories or public acts of heroism, these efforts unfolded quietly, in unmarked buildings, under code names, and behind locked doors. Yet their impact was enormous. They show that Canada, despite its smaller population and limited geopolitical clout compared to the superpowers, played a disproportionately vital role in the intelligence war that shaped the conflict's outcome. Camp X, for instance, was deliberately hidden from public knowledge. Even local residents near Whitby were unaware of what truly went on there. This veil of secrecy was essential not only to protect operatives in training, but to maintain the operational integrity of global missions. Many of the agents who trained there were sent into Nazi-occupied Europe, tasked with sabotage, resistance coordination, and intelligence gathering, missions where failure could mean torture or death. The success of these missions often hinged on their invisibility, and that invisibility was cultivated from day one in Canada. The cryptographic work done at the Examination Unit in Ottawa similarly flew under the radar. While it lacked the dramatic flair of battlefield exploits, its value was arguably even greater. Code-breaking and signal interception turned the tide in key engagements. The work of Canadian cryptanalysts, intercepting German, Japanese, and even Vichy French communications, fed directly into the Allied command's strategic decisions. These messages offered critical insights into enemy troop movements, supply routes, and even diplomatic shifts. Canada's geographic location also played a strategic role. Far removed from European and Pacific battlefields, it became a secure base of operations for intelligence training and communication work. It was a place where sensitive information could be handled with reduced risk of Axis interference, and where British and American intelligence could collaborate more freely. This allowed Canada to become a unique conduit, a safe zone, for top-secret collaboration and experimentation in wartime strategy. What's profound is how these secret efforts contributed to Canada's identity on the global stage. Until then, Canada had often been seen as a subordinate member of the British Empire, a loyal contributor, but rarely a leader. The intelligence work of WWII challenged that notion. It demonstrated that Canada could innovate, take initiative, and bear significant responsibility in a highly complex and dangerous global system. This momentum would continue into the Cold War, with Canada playing a role in NORAD, NATO intelligence, and various global monitoring systems. And yet, because so much of this work remained classified for decades, it never entered mainstream narratives of WWII in the way battles like D-Day or Dunkirk did. Most Canadians never knew that their country was home to some of the Allies' most advanced intelligence efforts. In this sense, it wasn't just a hidden history, it was a lost one, waiting to be rediscovered. By uncovering these stories now, we gain a fuller picture of Canada's contributions, not just as a battleground participant, but as a quiet engine of innovation and resistance in the war's most secretive theaters. It challenges us to rethink how we define heroism and victory in war, not only by the bombs dropped, but by the messages intercepted, the secrets decoded, and the quiet courage carried out in the shadows. During World War II, Canada wasn't just a supplier of troops and resources. It was also a key innovator in military technology and tactics. While often overshadowed by the more publicized innovations from the US, Britain, or Germany, Canada made unique contributions that had a lasting impact on the war effort and military strategy. Take the Canadian Ram tank, for instance. Developed in the early 1940s, it was based on the American M3 chassis, but designed and manufactured entirely in Canada. Although the Ram never saw combat as a frontline tank due to the rapid evolution of tank warfare, it played a crucial role in training thousands of Allied tank crews. Its development marked Canada's foray into large-scale armored vehicle production and laid the groundwork for its later contributions to post-war armored innovation. More importantly, it demonstrated that Canada could independently design, build, and supply complex military hardware, something few nations at the time could claim. Another critical innovation was Canada's contribution to radar technology. As early as 1939, Canadian scientists and engineers were collaborating with British experts on radar development. Working through the National Research Council, NRC, and in partnership with the secretive TIZARD mission, Canadian labs became instrumental in refining radar systems for detecting enemy aircraft and submarines. These technologies became game changers in both the Battle of Britain and the Battle of the Atlantic, offering the Allies a decisive edge in early warning and coordination. Canada even played a role in creating the Night Watchman radar, one of the first practical systems for nighttime air defense. Equally impressive, though less technological and more environmental, was Canada's expertise in snow warfare. Unlike most Allied nations, Canada had the perfect testing ground for winter combat, its own vast, cold terrain. This experience became a vital training resource. In places like Camp Petawawa and the Rockies, Canadian forces developed specialized snow warfare techniques, including ski patrols, snow camouflage, and survival tactics in sub-zero temperatures. These lessons were critical when training American and British troops who were deployed to similarly harsh conditions in Northern Europe and Scandinavia. This winter warfare knowledge wasn't just theoretical, it translated directly to operational readiness. The first Special Service Force, known as the Devil's Brigade, was a joint Canadian-American commando unit trained in Canada's rugged terrain. Their missions in Italy and southern France, especially in mountainous and wintry regions, benefited immensely from Canadian-led snow training. The force became one of the most effective elite units of the war, and their success can be traced back to those frozen training grounds in Canada. These contributions, tanks, radar, and snow combat expertise, may not be as widely remembered as D-Day or Dunkirk, but they tell a critical story. Canada was not just a helper in the war, but a quiet innovator. Its ability to adapt its unique geography, scientific talent, and engineering skill to meet wartime demands shows how even nations outside the great powers can influence global conflict in subtle but essential ways. Ultimately, this hidden legacy of military innovation underscores the broader theme of Canada's WWII role, unseen by many, underestimated by others, but deeply woven into the Allied path to victory. The British Commonwealth Air Training Plan, BCATP, was one of Canada's most monumental and far-reaching contributions to the Allied effort in World War II. Often referred to as the aerodrome of democracy, this vast initiative transformed the skies above Canada into the training ground for the air forces of Britain, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada itself. Launched in 1939 and operational by early 1940, the BCATP was a direct response to the dire need for trained aircrew pilots, navigators, gunners, bomb aimers, wireless operators, and flight engineers to sustain the Royal Air Force's campaign against the Axis powers. Canada was chosen as the centerpiece of the plan for several strategic reasons. It was geographically distant from the active theaters of war, reducing the risk of enemy attack. It had a huge amount of available land for airfields, and it enjoyed varied weather conditions that would prepare trainees for almost anything they'd encounter in combat. The scale of the BCATP was staggering. Over 100 air training schools and 200 auxiliary sites were established across 9 Canadian provinces. Small towns suddenly hosted runways, control towers, hangars, and barracks. In places like Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, or Moncton, New Brunswick, sleepy communities were transformed overnight into bustling training hubs with the constant drone of aircraft overhead. By the end of the war, more than 130,000 aircrew had trained in Canada under the program. These included men from across the British Empire, and even exiled airmen from occupied countries like Norway, France, Poland, and Czechoslovakia. It was one of the most ambitious international training efforts ever attempted and played a critical role in sustaining Allied air power throughout the war. But beyond just training numbers, the BCATP helped forge Canada's identity as a key player in global affairs. The program required massive logistical coordination, funding, and political will. It showcased Canada's growing independence from Britain while still demonstrating strong commitment to the Allied cause. It also left a lasting infrastructure legacy. Many of the airports and flight schools created during the BCATP would go on to become major regional airports and flight training centers after the war. Perhaps most importantly, the BCATP deepened the ties between Canada and the other Commonwealth nations, creating a web of shared experience and cooperation that would endure long after the final plane landed. It wasn't just about war, it was about partnership, unity, and Canada stepping onto the world stage in a leadership role few had anticipated. In the skies above the prairies and coasts, a new kind of battlefield was forged, not of destruction, but of preparation. Canada became the Allied Air Force's great classroom, turning raw recruits into seasoned aviators. It was one of Canada's proudest yet least remembered wartime legacies. Canada's transformation into an industrial and economic powerhouse during World War II is one of the most staggering yet underappreciated feats in Allied history. Though often overshadowed by the larger economies of the United States and Britain, Canada rapidly became what some historians call the arsenal of democracy in the North, a nation that, despite its smaller population, punched far above its weight in the production and delivery of war materiel. By the end of the war, Canada had the 4th largest navy and the 4th largest air force in the world. But it wasn't just about troops. It was about what they were equipped with. Over the span of just 6 years, Canada built nearly 800,000 military vehicles, including trucks, tanks, and armored carriers. The Canadian automotive industry, centered around Ontario, was completely repurposed to support the war effort. Companies like General Motors of Canada shifted from producing cars to building military hardware almost overnight. Shipbuilding was another massive undertaking. With German U-boats threatening Atlantic supply lines, Canada responded by constructing hundreds of naval vessels, including corvettes, destroyers, minesweepers, and cargo ships. Coastal cities like Halifax, Vancouver, and St. John were transformed into industrial hubs teeming with workers. Entire new shipyards were created just to meet demand, and Canadian-built ships became essential for transporting troops, food, fuel, and equipment across the oceans. In the skies, Canada also played a key role. Beyond training aircrew through the British Commonwealth Air Training Plan, it also manufactured thousands of aircraft, including the famous Lancaster bombers and Mosquito fighter bombers. The factories at Malton, Montreal, and other cities worked around the clock to keep the skies armed. On the home front, Canadian industries retooled for total war. Munitions factories produced over 1 billion rounds of small arms ammunition, and thousands of artillery shells and bombs. Women entered the workforce in record numbers, becoming riveters, welders, and machinists, mirroring the American Rosie the Riveter, but with a distinctly Canadian edge. The war reshaped gender roles and sparked long-term social changes across the country. But perhaps even more impressive was the economic shift. Canada's gross national product, GNP, more than doubled during the war years. Government spending surged, new industries were born, and war bonds helped finance the enormous costs. The war economy laid the foundation for Canada's post-war prosperity, including its modern welfare state, industrial base, and international influence. Canada's wartime production wasn't just a support act, it was a strategic pillar of Allied success. From tanks rolling across Europe to food shipments sustaining Britain, to munitions exploding over German lines, Canada was everywhere. The war effort proved that Canada was not just a colony or a quiet neighbor, but a critical engine of victory. It stood tall, industrially and economically, in the defining global conflict of the 20th century. One of the most legendary and secretive military units in World War II was the 1st Special Service Force, FSSF, also known as the Devil's Brigade. This elite Joint Canada-US commando unit was forged in secrecy and became one of the most effective special forces units of the war, despite operating in the shadows for much of its existence. The FSSF was created in 1942 with the express purpose of carrying out daring, high-risk missions behind enemy lines. It combined the best soldiers from both Canada and the United States, handpicked for their physical toughness, mental agility, and combat expertise. Training was brutal, focusing on skills like mountain climbing, demolition, hand-to-hand combat, and perhaps most famously, night raids. These soldiers were taught to move swiftly, silently, and ruthlessly, striking targets and disappearing before the enemy could respond. One of their first major successes came during the Italian campaign. The Devil's Brigade was tasked with seizing key positions in the rugged mountains and carrying out raids in the dead of night. Their performance was so remarkable that their reputation spread throughout the Allied forces, and their operations, though often classified, began to shape special forces tactics for years to come. The unit's effectiveness was partly due to the unique nature of their operations. They weren't just storming beaches or engaging in conventional battles. They specialized in sabotage, guerrilla warfare, and intelligence gathering. Whether it was blowing up key bridges, disrupting enemy supply lines, or taking out strategic targets deep in enemy territory, the FSSF's ability to operate behind the lines had a significant impact on the course of the war. They were masters of stealth and surprise, striking fear into the hearts of Axis soldiers. However, despite their immense contributions, the role of Canada in the Devil's Brigade is often overlooked in modern depictions. Hollywood films and pop culture portray the unit as an exclusively American force, erasing the significant Canadian component that helped shape the unit's success. In reality, Canadian soldiers made up a substantial portion of the brigade, and their bravery was critical to its success. In fact, many Canadians in the unit became some of its most decorated soldiers. One of the most remarkable feats of the FSSF occurred during the assault on the Italian town of Anzio in 1944. The brigade's involvement in this brutal campaign showed just how effective their tactics were. They held off enemy forces in highly challenging terrain and played a key role in the liberation of Italy. It was operations like this that earned the Devil's Brigade its infamous reputation, sometimes feared by the Axis and revered by the Allies. In the years that followed, many FSSF members went on to form the backbone of Canada's and the US's modern special forces, influencing tactics and techniques that are still used today. But despite their groundbreaking success, their story remained relatively unknown for decades. The bravery of these soldiers, who often operated in complete anonymity, deserves more recognition, especially for the important Canadian role in the unit's creation and operations. They were an integral part of one of the most successful special forces units of the Second World War, and their legacy lives on in the tactics and bravery of modern-day special operations forces. The 1st Special Service Force was a quintessential example of Canada's quiet, yet indispensable contribution to World War II, operating in the shadows, carrying out covert missions, and delivering results that changed the course of history. The end of World War II marked a turning point for Canada, not just in terms of its military contributions, but also in how the world began to view it on the global stage. While the war had undeniably strengthened Canada's military and industrial capacities, it also laid the groundwork for the country's evolution into a more independent and respected international power. Canada's emerging independence before the EU's war, Canada's foreign policy and military decisions were largely controlled by Britain, as Canada was still part of the British Empire. However, Canada's pivotal contributions to the war effort, including its role in intelligence, industrial output, and military engagement, accelerated its path toward greater autonomy. By joining the Allied powers independently from Britain and making significant contributions to the war, Canada cemented its status as a self-governing nation with a strong international voice. This shift was evident even in the post-war era. Canada's active participation in international organizations, such as the United Nations, UN, and its founding membership in the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, signaled that the country was no longer just a member of the British Empire, but a respected player in global diplomacy. Its post-war foreign policy began to reflect a more independent stance, no longer heavily influenced by British interests. Shaping NATO and intelligence alliances in the years following the war, Canada's role in shaping NATO became increasingly important. The country's military experience and strategic location made it a key member in the creation of this defensive alliance, which sought to counter Soviet expansion and maintain stability in Europe. Canadian military personnel and intelligence experts played an instrumental role in the early years of NATO, helping to organize and strengthen the alliance's operations. In the realm of intelligence, Canada's legacy from World War II continued to influence global efforts throughout the Cold War. Canada's cryptographic work, especially its involvement in breaking access codes and gathering intelligence through organizations like the Examination Unit in Ottawa, positioned it as a reliable partner for post-war intelligence operations. As the world entered the Cold War, Canada's collaboration with the United States, Britain, and other allies solidified its role within intelligence and security circles. Secrecy and declassification of WWII documents. Much of Canada's contributions during World War II were kept under wraps for decades. Many of the operations, such as those carried out by Camp X and the cryptographic efforts, were classified as top secret and remained hidden from the public eye long after the war. As time has passed, however, many of these documents have been declassified, revealing just how critical Canada's role was in shaping the outcome of the war. The declassification process has slowly revealed a more complete picture of Canada's wartime contributions, allowing historians and the general public to better understand the full scope of the country's involvement. These revelations have also helped uncover the important roles played by Canadian military leaders, spies, and cryptologists, highlighting their contributions to the Allied victory. Despite the secrecy, the slow but steady declassification of documents has allowed Canada to reclaim its wartime legacy, offering new perspectives on the significant impact it had on the global stage during one of the most pivotal conflicts in history. Ongoing recognition and reassessment in recent years, Canada's role in World War II has been the subject of renewed interest and reassessment. Public recognition of the country's wartime contributions has grown, as historians, filmmakers, and the general public have begun to shine a spotlight on the overlooked aspects of Canada's involvement, from its industrial output to its intelligence work. This process of rediscovery and recognition not only underscores Canada's critical role in securing Allied victory, but also highlights how its experiences during the war helped shape its post-war identity, one that was more independent, more engaged globally, and increasingly confident in its place on the world stage. In the end, Canada's hidden contributions during World War II are not just a matter of military pride. They are a fundamental part of the story of how a nation transformed itself on the global stage, gaining respect, independence, and influence that continue to echo in the 21st century. Conclusion: as we've uncovered, Canada's contributions to World War II were far more secretive and significant than most people realize. From espionage training at Camp X, to the groundbreaking work of Canadian cryptographers, to its massive industrial output and creation of elite special forces, Canada's hidden roles were pivotal to the Allied war effort. These lesser-known stories of military innovation, intelligence operations, and wartime solidarity not only helped win the war, but also shaped Canada into the nation we know today. Now we want to hear from you. Which Canadian secret surprised you the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed uncovering Canada's hidden history, don't forget to check out some of our other related videos. America's Hidden WWII Secrets. Explore the surprising covert operations and unsung heroes of the U.S. in the war. Britain's real spy network revealed. Discover the hidden world of British intelligence and the untold stories of its wartime efforts. Make sure to like, subscribe, and share to dive deeper into more Hidden Histories. Your support helps bring these forgotten stories to light.